Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on.
Hunted Through the Woods by LimeWire Virus. So, this happened 2 days ago. I'm a 25-year-old female, and I was on a date with another girl, a 21-year-old female. Let's call her Lex. It was going super well, and we'd been talking for the better part of a year. Her coworker invited us and her roommate, a 25-year-old male, let's call him Kyle, to a party. It went super well. We had a blast, and on our way back, he drove in front of us while we took her motorcycle back and followed him. This is where it all goes wrong. He randomly turned into a parking lot, so we followed him, and it turns out he was passed out in the driver's seat. We did not realize he was this drunk. Lex tried to wake him up, and when he got out of the car, he just started beating the shit out of her. So I ran over and pulled him off of her and started beating him. He put up a good fight until he took me to the ground and started strangling me. Then he grabbed me by the hair and started bashing my face into the pavement repeatedly. This guy was 6'2", and I'm 5'3". I started to fight back even harder to get him to stop because I thought he was going to kill me. So I clocked him really hard and he stood up, bleeding all over me, and said, "I'm going to fucking kill you." At this point, Lex picked me up from the ground and just screamed, "Run!" So we ran in opposite directions into the woods. He followed me. I was much faster, so I was hiding in the woods while he walked around going, "Oh, Gabby, come out wherever you are. I'm gonna fucking kill you." I wound up army crawling through the woods so he couldn't see me, and hiding there until I couldn't hear him anymore. Lex had run in the opposite direction, so she wound up by the road and flagged down a rando to call the cops. They came and found me hiding in the woods. He broke her jaw and may have fractured my skull. I'm waiting on the CT results. So yeah, there you have it. Hands down the most terrifying thing I've ever been through. Haunted Airbnb by Dragonfly715. My daughter and I just came home from our trip to Virginia, where we had booked an Airbnb for 6 nights. We left after the 3rd. The host had the typical Southern hospitality personality, but something was off that first night. The door code used was a string of 7 numbers that she had memorized, but was nearly impossible for me to remember. I ended up locking ourselves out upon arrival and unloading, and had to walk over to the host home to request the code again. She welcomed us into her home, and then began asking questions, and let it be known that the questions were directed at my daughter, who was 8, and that I should remain silent. That set off alarm bells right there. Also, upon arrival, the host had mentioned that we should close the curtains to the house, even though it's a safe place, because we were 2 girls. Mind you, there were no other homes around, as it was a huge private property. We walked back over to where we were staying and re-entered the premises. That first night, I kept hearing what sounded like a large bug with a hard shell continuously flying into the mini-split in the bedroom. However, after 18 hours of travel, I was too tired to care. The second night, however, was a different story. The bathroom attached to the room on the 2nd floor kept having this metallic tinkling noise when we were in bed. My daughter thankfully slept through it. However, I kept experiencing anxiety and feeling unsettled. I tried to tell myself I was just still exhausted from the traveling and just feeling a little anxious. During the 2 days we came and left, a fan I left on was turned off every time we arrived back. There was a small extendable mirror, the only mirror in the bathroom that one could also tilt up and down, and the mirror kept being tilted down towards a child's level. I assumed it was my daughter until I tilted it back the final day there. I went downstairs to where my daughter was coloring, and when I went back upstairs, the mirror was tilted back down again. Finally, the third night was the last straw. After feeling for those prior days that we were constantly being watched, my daughter went to take a shower and said to me, "I'm closing the bathroom doors so the lightning bugs can't watch me." My daughter is very extroverted and attached to me, and she never wants the bathroom door closed when showering. This let me know that she too felt something, but just didn't have the words to explain it. We finally went to sleep, and she fell asleep pretty fast. However, I once again couldn't sleep because of anxiety and began experiencing panic attacks, which I'm not prone to. Then the noises began, only worse than the 2 prior nights. The metallic tinkling noise in the bathroom grew louder and faster. I tried to tell myself it was a mouse, but I have slept in cabins with mice, and they leave droppings, make squeaks, and you can hear them scurry. None of that was happening. Then I heard what sounded like someone tinkering with the items left on the bathroom counter, and it sounded like they dropped a glass. Next, I heard the closet door across from the bed open, but my suitcases were in the way, and I heard the door hit them. These noises went on for hours. Everything inside me told me to run, protect my daughter, and get out of there as soon as possible. But the next morning, I went into the bathroom, and there were a child's muddy footprints coming out of the shower and onto a white towel laid in front of the shower. That was not there the night before, and I tried to explain it away, but I couldn't. My daughter had not played in any mud any of the days that we were there, and even if she had, there would have been muddy footprints from the door where we had taken our shoes off. I immediately began packing our bags to never return again. And after 2 nights of not coming back, the host messaged me and offered an additional night free on her. Obviously, I declined. Do I mention anything to the host about what happened? Do I leave a review? It took me several days to shake the feeling of this experience. It was so creepy, I may never stay in an Airbnb again. Creepy Teacher by Same Page. This was in the 9th grade, and I had walked into my classroom. I had history during that period, which definitely wasn't my favorite. My teacher for that class was a bald, white, old-looking man with blue eyes, and he seemed old and frail, but he had a mouth on him. I won't share his name for privacy reasons. He was weirdly really nice to all of his female students, always giving them compliments and calling them a good girl. I didn't think about it as something weird until I heard countless girls sharing things about what he would say to them. He'd act really weird and flirtatious with the young female students and talk to them as if he weren't their teacher. Most girls felt really uncomfortable while being in the room with him, and even nervous. He had this aura that was off, and it made the whole classroom feel eerie. It would be very awkward listening to him talk with the students, and hearing him would make your skin crawl. "You're such a bad girl," he'd say. Doesn't that sound wrong? Let me know if you think I'm reaching. One day, this guy just disappeared and was never seen again. People flooded their social media with different theories on why he was gone, and some of them were outrageous and couldn't be true. But it turns out, he actually was a predator and had sexually assaulted many girls in the school. He actually was arrested and was never seen again. More girls came out with more stories about him, sharing their experiences. And I saw this as relief because most of the time he'd make all of his students just feel uncomfortable, including me. But to that guy who's now out of our lives, good riddance. Something Was Watching Us by Legitimate Radish. A couple of summers ago, me and some of my buddies went to a large abandoned factory that had been burned down to smoke and hang out together without anyone being able to bother us. The front of the factory was still standing, and we had found an entrance into the front. We'd all been inside multiple times, except one of us. That night was just like any other night, without anything unusual about it. But somehow the topic of mythical creatures had come up, and I asked my buddy Jay what skinwalkers were, and if he believed in them. He was kind of shocked and told me to not say that out loud again, to which I said, "What? Skinwalker?" Then he told me, "Dude, shut the fuck up." I found it amusing that he and my other buddies, Justin and Bobby, took something so silly so serious. I let it go, but my other friend Tristan wanted to poke some more fun at them. "Oh no, look at me," he said before he began to whistle and mockingly say, "Skinwalker," a couple of times while simultaneously walking into the middle of the factory. This part of the factory was burnt down and had no roof or walls. There was just some grass in the middle and bricks around the perimeter. I was watching Tristan walk into the middle of the factory when he suddenly stopped and froze. I was still looking at him, trying to figure out what the hell he was doing. He then began to walk back and looked at me and threw his hands in the air while pointing in a circular motion, mouthing words that I couldn't understand. I said, "What?" And he repeated himself more clearly and said, "Get in the car." To which everyone except me frantically did. We had taken 2 separate cars to the factory. I drove Justin and Tristan to where Justin's car was so they could both leave. Justin hopped out of my car, sprinted to his, and then started it up. Tristan opened the back door of my car to say what he was getting was his jacket, but as he got to the passenger seat of my car, before he could even take another step, his head darted to the left, and he jumped in the back seat of Justin's car and just screamed "Drive" at him. They sped off. In that moment, I was a little scared, but mostly confused about what was going on. I didn't take off very fast because I had to turn my car around, and I was now looking in my rearview mirror at Jay and Bobby, asking them what had happened or if they saw why Tristan jumped in Justin's car. I saw Bobby turn his head around in my rearview mirror, looking behind us. And shortly after, he whipped his head back around and screamed super loud, "Dude, floor it!" And I did. We all rendezvoused at a local market to figure out what had happened. I asked Tristan what had freaked him out so much. This honestly really did concern me because neither one of us was superstitious at all. He told me and the others that he heard something like a twig snapping when he froze and looked toward the front of the building, which only had 2 staircases on the left and right side and an elevator shaft in the middle. He then explained that he saw a silhouette of a tall, thin person on the highest floor in the middle of the building, where the doors would have been, and then that figure disappeared. Tristan had never been inside, though, so he thought he saw someone standing on the 3rd floor, to which Jay explained that there was no floor up there. It was just an empty elevator shaft. We were all kind of shaken up by that. I also asked him why he screamed "Drive" at Justin and then jumped into the back seat of his car, to which he explained he heard something or someone sprinting towards us. That's why he jumped in. I then asked Bobby why he asked me to floor it, and he said that he had seen some long, skinny, humanoid thing sprinting at my car on all 4s really fast. Well, that's my story. I think maybe it could have been some homeless person sprinting all 4s at my car, but that doesn't explain Tristan seeing the silhouette of someone standing up there in that empty elevator shaft. Chased Through the Woods by Mio Zero. A friend and I, both of us 21-year-old females, went to Applebee's for a few $1 margaritas and then went off to a park where she said she knew a cool spot. We got 20 minutes away at this park and then went down a path that led us to a really cool bay area. We found a nice log and sat there and watched the sunset. As we were relaxing on the log, a family strolled by with their dog to hang out on the other side of the shore. Then a few minutes went by and a couple came through and sat up. They ate a big pineapple with a knife, which I had never seen before. The sun set, but it was still light out, and we hadn't thought about the walk back. And eventually we had to go, and by now it was dark. The wooden area we had to walk through was getting even darker. We started off and she got her phone camera out. It was pitch black at this point. We started talking about how creepy it was. And I got an uneasy feeling. That feeling you get that something is behind you. Well, we were walking along and we went across a bridge up a little hill. When all of a sudden from behind we heard loud, fast footsteps on the bridge. I turned and I saw a light from what appeared to be another phone, going back and forth as if the person was running. We panicked. We started running, and I was thinking, there's no way someone is chasing us. His footsteps kind of sounded like he might have even been on a bike. So I thought we'd go up this steep hill on our left, and there was no way the person would go up a hill on his bike. Well, it turns out, there wasn't a bike. We stopped running as we didn't hear anything. My friend just flashed a light behind us, and there was the silhouette of a man jogging towards us. His body posture seemed to be kind of hunched forward, like he was tired from running. We started running again, and then eventually stopped to see if this guy was still chasing us. Of course, we heard the footsteps running towards us still. We kept looking back while running to make sure that he was not right on top of us. But at one point my friend finally screamed, "Hey!" in a panicked voice. This guy screamed back, "Hey!" And then after that he said, "What, are you scared?" We took off running again, and now my friend was on the phone with the police. We finally hit a paved road, which was nowhere near her car. When I took us up the hill to get there, I found out it wasn't the path we originally took. We got to a house and knocked on the door. There were lights on, but no one answered. We started down the road to their neighbors, and when I looked back, I saw the silhouette of the same man who had been chasing us, walking behind the first person's house. He paused, then got to the fence, and then creeped back into the darkness. The second neighbor did help us. His wife got us some water, and the police came to take us back to my friend's car. That was the most traumatic experience I think I've ever had. The intentions of that guy just felt sinister, and the way he was yelling at us felt just odd. I hate that feeling that I have, and I have so many questions that won't be answered. But the one that I can't get out of my head is, what if he caught up to us? Creeper at Kids PlayPlace, submitted by Charlie Daniels. About a week ago, I took my daughter and son to a local trampoline park in our area. It's just a big place with all kinds of stuff for the kiddos to run around and burn off some energy, and they have parties and things like that too. It's actually pretty cool, but I'm in my 40s, and as much as I'd like to think I can keep up with my kids, I had to take breaks. Getting old sucks. My kids were running around with some friends they had made there, having a blast, and I was just putzing around on my phone killing time. I got a tap on my knee, and I looked up to see a little boy around 7 years old, and he had tears in his eyes. I said, "What's up, little guy?" He said he couldn't find his mom and that there was a scary man trying to talk to him, and he was scared. I got up and said, "Okay, let's go to the front desk and see what's what." He took my hand and we walked to the main gate area, and I asked if they could page the kid's mom. They said sure, and did. We waited around for a few minutes, and the kid then told me more about this scary man. He looked me in the eye and said the guy asked him if he needed to use the bathroom, and he told him no. Then the guy said he had some stuffies he could give him if he came into the bathroom with him, but the kid ran away. I repeated this to the front desk people, and then they asked the boy what the guy looked like. He said he was tall, had long hair, and was wearing a blue shirt with a white Texas Rangers hat. I thought to myself, well, that can't be too hard to find, and I started looking around the place to see if I could spot him. The front desk people paged the missing mom again, and we waited. My kids came running over, and I told them that I was helping some people out and they could keep playing. My son asked the boy if he wanted to play, and I said okay, I'd stay at the front waiting for the mom to show up. Another 15 minutes went by with other workers looking around for the woman and this guy with a Ranger's hat, but they didn't see anyone like the kid described. But that's when something caught my eye. A guy in a blue shirt and a white hat talking to another little boy. The kid nodded and the guy went straight for the bathrooms and went inside. I didn't lose a step and went quickly over to the bathrooms just as this other little boy was getting there. I told him, "Stay right here." I got out my phone and started videoing myself walking into what was supposed to be a family bathroom. 2 seconds after I opened the door, I heard a guy's voice say, "In here, partner, I've got some stuffies for you." He sounded so upbeat and excited, my stomach turned. I went to the big stall door and opened it to see the guy standing there with his pants around his ankles and his Johnson at full salute. I got it all on video. The guy yelled, "Who are you?" Then he started screaming at me to get out. I just said, "Got you, you sick fuck," then quickly turned to leave the bathroom. When I got outside, the little boy was still standing there, now with his father, who asked me what was going on. I told him everything that I knew, and that the sicko was still in the bathroom. The guy practically knocked me over to get to this sicko, but I told him to just call the cops and I'd make sure the guy didn't leave. His hands were clenched, ready to kick ass, and hell, so was I. But I told him it was better for the cops to take care of it. He looked at me with rage in his eyes. I mean, not at me, but for that sicko in the bathroom. He just nodded at me, called the cops, and I stood guard. His poor little guy was asking if he was in trouble, and his dad said no, not at all. The little kid's mom came up, and while Dad was on the phone, I told her what was going on as quietly as possible so the little kid couldn't hear, and she started to freak out. "Take Johnny away from here, honey," said the guy, and then he kept talking to someone on the phone. He motioned like he was going to the front desk, and I said, "I'm not going anywhere. That guy's not getting out of there." There was no sound or movement from the bathroom, and I'm willing to bet the sicko was standing right at the door listening to everything we were saying and doing. Anyway, the cops showed up and talked to the guy, his little guy, and then me before going into the bathroom. I could hear a lot of talking and then a lot of shouting. Another cop pulled me aside and I showed him the video I took, complete with the guy talking about stuffed animals and being naked. By now, my kids were back with me and the lost little boy, and they were scared I was in trouble with the police. To be honest, I forgot about me helping the first kiddo finding his mom, so I told them to go back to playing and that I'd find them in a little bit. Finally, the cops came out with the guy in handcuffs, and he started yelling, "That's the guy! That's the guy! That's the pervert who assaulted me!" They just pulled him away and took him outside. The other cops kept talking to the front desk people, who told them that the creep wasn't with any kids, hadn't paid or registered anyone to be there, including himself. He must have just walked in, and they thought he was a parent. Then, stumbling through the door, came the lost kid's mom. Stumbling is a light word. She was shit-faced drunk and slurring her words, asking for her son. One of the cops was within earshot as the woman started yelling at the front desk people to get her kid and get him now, and that they were all wasting her time. I thought, lady, you're wasted enough for all the adults here. The cop nearby came over and started talking to the woman and asked her why she was there, and she just started yelling at him, calling him a pig and to get out of her way. She wanted her son and that she was leaving with him. The cop said, "You're not going anywhere, and you're not taking your son anywhere either." Of course, right at that moment, my kids and the little guy came up, and the kid looked horrified to see his mom being let outside by a cop. He burst into tears and said, man, and this broke my heart, "Not again, Mommy." Another cop came over and asked the little guy where his daddy was, and the kid, through sobs, said that his dad was at work. In a roundabout conversation, they figured out where work was and called him to come get his kid, that the mom was likely being arrested for public intoxication and quite possibly a DUI. She was also putting up a fight. That I could see through the windows. Then I watched her take a swing at a cop talking to her, and I thought, well, that wasn't a smart move, lady. And into handcuffs she went. I asked the cop if I could take the little boy with my kids to get some ice cream to get away from all of this, and he said yes, but stick around where he could see us. The idea of ice cream seemed to cheer the kid up a little bit. Half an hour later, the dad shows up looking pissed off as all hell. But he was smiling at his son, and he grabbed him in a big bear hug. It was cool to see that, this big dude covered in drywall dust scooping his little dude up. He came over to me and shook my hand and asked my name. We exchanged information, and then he had to go and deal with his drunken wife. I stood there thinking about everything that had gone down in such a short period of time. My son asked if he could get the little boy's phone number so they could play sometime, and I said go ahead. And he ran over to the kid and the dad smiled down at my son and gave him a business card for his drywall business. He also said, "Hey, tell your old man to call me." Then the first cops I encountered came over and asked me to send them the video of the perv that I had on my phone, and I gave them all my information as well. They said they'd be contacting me for more stuff. Those parents also came over and exchanged numbers with me. Then I gathered up my kids and say, "Let's go home, you weasels." I had enough of the trampoline park. So, to wit, I helped a pervert get caught with his pants down, prevented a kid from getting in a vehicle with a plastered mom, and it turns out I made 2 new friends. We've all been exchanging texts and we're barbecuing at my house this weekend. I also have to speak to a detective tomorrow. Love your channel, Uncle Josh. I hope this is scary enough and not just namby-pamby. Man, there's a lot of sick and sorry people out there. I'm glad I played a small role in protecting 2 kids. Stay on top of things wherever you are, guys. Keep a sharp eye out and never turn down a kid that needs your help. I'm looking forward to seeing all of those people this weekend. Whistling Outside My Garden by One Air. So around 1:50 in the morning one night, I was staying up late and I heard this whistling call, like straight out of a movie. I heard it and didn't think much of it, but not long after, I heard the exact same whistling call. And then I thought it was my brother-in-law calling for my sister, as it was late and she was showering. But then I realized my brother-in-law was in the shower, and my sister was in her room. And the whistling call came again. It was loud enough for it to sound like it came right next to my room, although it was coming from outside. I put my phone down to listen if the whistle would come again, and as I waited, the call came again, but it had changed. This time it was just a 1-second whistle. I mean, imagine someone whistling, but instead it stops immediately after making the initial noise. That's what it sounded like. So I was creeped out, and I messaged my sister asking if my brother-in-law was whistling, but she told me he's in the shower. My sister then told me that she'd also heard the whistle, and thought it was me. What seemed like 10 minutes after not hearing the whistle, my heart dropped as the first whistle that I had heard started again. Me and my sister asked each other if we had heard the same thing. So my sister peeked outside with a light, and no one was there. Her neighbors were asleep, they weren't out in their garden, so we went back on our phones, totally creeped out, and still messaging each other as we waited for my brother-in-law. While we waited, we still heard the whistling, but ever since we started hearing them more, the whistles were happening at longer intervals. At times it would be the whistle call or the 1 second shorter whistle. Mind you, this was coming from right below outside our garden. We were on the 2nd floor of the house. Finally, my brother-in-law came out, and my sister told him about what was happening. So he grabbed a torch and looked outside, but no one was there. The both of them went downstairs and checked every door and turned on all the lights, but no one was there either. Brother-in-law went into the garden with a torch, and there was no one there. To this day, we have no clue what that was, and I kind of struggled to sleep that night. New Home with an Unexpected Guest by Celery Pale. I'm a little hesitant to share this story, as I've told a few people this, and they seem to question its legitimacy. But here goes. When I was around 11, my parents and I relocated to Texas because my mom landed an amazing job offer. Initially, we stayed in a few rental houses for about a year, until we finally decided to purchase a house. The backstory of our new home was quite intriguing. It previously belonged to 3 elderly women whom the town called the Golden Girls. They passed away one after the other, leaving Dolores, the last owner, behind. After Dolores passed away, her son put the house up for sale, and that's when we became its new owners. We settled in and lived there for around 3 years. And throughout our time in the house, we encountered various inexplicable paranormal incidents. Initially, we brushed them off, thinking little of them. However, one particular day, we began to suspect there was more to these occurrences. It was when my dad experienced something truly eerie. As he walked through the living room toward his bedroom, he suddenly stopped and exclaimed, insert my name here, "Stop it!" Confused, I looked up from the couch and asked him what he meant. He then revealed that he had seen in his peripheral vision what appeared to be hands moving up and down behind his shoulders and feet dancing behind him. My mom also experienced a large hand gripping her arm when she was attempting to sleep. She told me she was half asleep trying to pry these huge fingers off of her arm while a hot breath panted in her face. But the most disturbing incident occurred when I was around 13 years old. One morning I was jolted awake by the sound of the garage door handle violently shaking. My dad had gone to Oklahoma to retrieve some of our belongings, leaving me alone in the house with my mom for the time being. Hesitantly, I crept into the hallway which connected my parents' bedroom to mine. As I headed toward my mom's room, she emerged, still groggy from sleep, wearing a towel wrapped around her head, just wearing her underwear with mascara smudged under her eyes. She squinted at me, a typical sight since she was virtually blind without her glasses or contacts. Panic was rising within me, and I blurted out, "Is someone breaking in? What do we do?" Her response was oddly nonchalant as she mumbled, "What?" before retreating back to her room. Confusion and fear gripped me as I wondered why she wasn't alarmed. I retreated to my closet and dialed my dad in a panic, and he instructed me to call 911 while he contacted our neighbor, who arrived armed with a pistol. Still on the line with the emergency dispatcher, I followed my dad's advice to escape through the back door. As I made my way, I encountered my mom and our neighbors standing there with the front door wide open. My mom appeared perplexed as she asked, "Why didn't you open the door? I went out to get groceries." Stunned and speechless, I hung up the phone, apologized to the dispatcher, and explained to my mom what had happened. Her bewildered expression mirrored my own disbelief as I recounted the eerie events of that morning. Now I'm 23 years old, and it still shakes me up a little bit when I think back to that day. My parents believe me as they have had a few encounters happen to them as well in that house. I personally believe it was Dolores playing a trick on me. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on my podcast or this channel, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. All that stuff helps. And of course, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about the stories. I will return your comment as soon as possible. I get back to everyone there too. Follow me on social media. There are links to that in the description. And if you'd like to take your support a step further, find a link to my Patreon page and my TeePublic storefront. Get yourself some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.